Welcome to the deep dive. So you know how when you look at an old photograph of your home, maybe the kitchen or the dining room, there's like this certain inherent warmth to it,
Oh, definitely.
like
Yeah.
a deep, almost invisible predictability. You know exactly how the light hits the oak floorboards at 4 in the afternoon.
Right. You know which cabinet door squeaks.
Exactly.
It's actually the psychology of spatial safety. We rely heavily on that domestic architecture to shelter us. And I don't mean just from the elements, but from psychological chaos.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The home is supposed to be the space where the mundane, comforting routines of your life happen. It creates a baseline of emotional security.
Right. But what happens when that exact same space, with the exact same afternoon light, suddenly transforms into the site of your absolute worst nightmare?
Wow. Yeah.
Like when the architecture of safety suddenly, without any warning, just becomes a cage.
The resulting cognitive dissonance is, it's profoundly disorienting.
I can imagine.
When the mind is forced to reconcile the ultimate sanctuary with ultimate violence, it completely fractures your sense of reality. The brain literally struggles to process the environment.
Which brings us to the core of this deep dive. When the familiar layout of your own house becomes the geography of a crime scene, we're looking at The Darkest Night by Christopher Grindle.
It is such a heavy piece of work.
It really is. It's a gripping, incredibly dark narrative poem.
Mm.
And it takes us from that exact picture of domestic tranquility straight into a tragic climax of violence.
Straight into it.
It's a first-person account of a murder-suicide.
Right.
And crucially, it is framed from the very beginning as a dream or, perhaps a fragmented, broken memory.
Right.
So our mission today is to unpack how Grindle uses pacing, shifting tones, and this incredibly unreliable narrator to pull you directly into a deeply disturbing sequence of events.
The sheer density of the psychological heavy lifting he accomplishes in such a short space is just remarkable.
It's so fast.
It is. By trapping us inside a single character's broken perspective, he forces us to experience how quickly a human mind can manipulate tone and twist reality just to justify the unthinkable.
And the narrative structure doesn't even give you a chance to brace yourself, like at all.
No, not even a little bit.
The poem literally opens by spoiling its own ending. The very first lines are, "'Twas darkest night when I had that dream, my hand was around her neck again. She could not move, she could not scream, she knew this was to be her end."
It's brutal.
We start at 100 miles an hour, staring directly at a murder.
Hmm.
But then, immediately after that brutal confession, the poem it slams on the brakes and dials us back in time.
Starting with the climax is a highly effective way to engineer this pervasive, inescapable sense of dread.
Right, you already know what's coming.
Exactly. In literary terms, it's a prolepsis, a flash forward that taints everything that follows. Because immediately after establishing that horrifying endpoint, the narrator shifts gears.
Yeah, to describe what he calls one blissful day.
But as the reader, you already have the blood on your hands, so to speak. You cannot enjoy the bliss because you know the destination.
Totally. And the bliss he describes is so specifically domestic.
Yeah.
He sets this scene of the classic empty nest. After the children had all moved away, we had the house all to ourselves.
It sounds so peaceful on the surface.
It does. He describes how they lounged together through morn and noon. It sounds incredibly peaceful, like they've finally reached the finish line of a chaotic, decades-long parenting marathon.
It sounds like the golden hour of a relationship. You finally have time, space, and quiet for just each other.
Yeah.
But Grindel uses the physical passage of time in the poem to mirror the impending psychological collapse.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they lounge from morning to noon, which represents the warmth and light of their history. But then the text notes, the sun was setting all too soon.
And here come the shadows.
Exactly.
The imagery shifts so drastically, he says, the shadows lengthening where we dwell, a cold chill replacing our joyful mood between lunch and supper's interlude.
It's a masterful atmospheric shift.
The house is literally darkening around them.
And that environmental shift, the lengthening shadows, the cold chill it serves as the psychological preamble to the inciting incident.
Setting the stage.
Right. The external environment is cooling down and darkening in perfect synchronization with the internal dynamic between the two characters.
Because right there, in that quiet, seemingly harmless interlude between lunch and supper, she speaks.
The drop.
She explains that it was time for us to talk.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the worst words you can hear.
The universal stomach-dropping dread of that exact phrase. I have to say, the pacing here reminds me of something very visceral.
What's that?
It's like the agonizing, slow click, click, click of a roller coaster car climbing to the absolute top of the track.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, like everything seems perfectly fine during the lounging that's the climb.
Yeah.
You're just taking in the view, feeling the sunshine.
Enjoying the ride. But the phrase, "time for us to talk," is the exact moment the front cart tips over the edge. It immediately shifts the genre of the day from romance to horror. The kinetic energy just takes over.
That analogy tracks perfectly with the physiological response we see in the text. The drop happens, and the narrator experiences a massive sympathetic nervous system dump,
Pure panic.
a pure fight-or-flight response. He says, I understood the implications of what I had heard. My legs started to tremble, and I feared to walk.
The anticipation of the threat literally paralyzes him.
But he's forced to move, though.
Right, he says, apprehensively, I stumbled to the dining table 21 to carry myself forth across the flow.
The language starts breaking down here.
Yes, we need to stop and look at this line because the text here does something incredibly strange.
The numbers.
It has these bizarre numerical intrusions, like dining table 21, and abbreviated cutoff words like flow instead of floor. It adds this surreal, glitchy quality to the memory. Why does he specify dining table 21?
This is where the poem moves from a standard narrative into a really fascinating exploration of a fracturing mind.
Okay, break that down for me.
There are a few ways to interpret those glitches. From a psychological standpoint, during a highly traumatic event, the brain often experiences dissociation.
Like detaching from reality.
Exactly. It stops processing the holistic narrative and fixates on bizarre, irrelevant micro details like counting the number of steps at the table or fixating on a serial number on a piece of furniture.
So it's a cognitive defense mechanism trying to distract from the emotional horror.
Right. His brain is essentially buffering. It can't load the emotional reality of his wife leaving him, so it throws up random data instead.
Wow. But there's another way to look at this, especially given what happens at the end of the poem.
The evidence markers.
Yes. What if these aren't just random mental glitches? What if they are literal police evidence markers?
That is a deeply chilling interpretation. If this entire poem is a retrospective memory, a dream, as he calls it in the first line, he might not be remembering the living room as it was.
He's remembering the aftermath.
He might be remembering the crime scene photographs. Evidence marker 21 next to the dining table.
That is so dark. And the missing letters.
The missing letters, like flow instead of floor, could represent the literal degradation of his memory, or the way trauma just shears off the edges of our reality.
The language itself is breaking down just as his sanity does.
Precisely. And the dread is fully actualized as he reaches that table.
Now that he is seated, the confrontation begins. And this is where his reality entirely splits from objective truth.
It really does.
She tells him that the relationship has run its course and that she has found someone new. And the narrator explicitly claims she delivers this news without remorse.
He says he can tell from the look in her eyes exactly what she had in mind.
Yeah, that she meant to hurt him even more.
Notice how rapidly the narrator's internal vocabulary mutates here.
Oh, it's immediate.
The language pivots violently from the passive romantic imagery of lounging in the sun to aggressive militaristic terminology.
Completely. He uses a strong curse word, calling her a belligerent B word, and says her words were like spears.
He has placed himself in an active war zone.
He says, how long had she aspired to deceive? My eyes could see but not believe. He's painting her as this calculating, malicious mastermind who's been plotting his downfall for years.
But we really need to look at the physical evidence he provides versus the narrative he constructs.
Right.
This is the crucial pivot point of the psychological drama. He claims she is hiding a smile behind her tears.
Oh, wait, I have to push back hard on the narrator's logic here.
Go for it.
Let's really look at the image he just gave us. He admits she is crying. She has tears on her face as she's telling her husband of many years, the man she built a home with, the man she raised children with, that she's leaving him.
Right.
If she is sitting at the dining table weeping, how on earth is she savoring his pain? Isn't he just actively twisting reality in his own mind?
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like he is projecting his own intense rage, his own feelings of inadequacy and betrayal entirely onto her.
Your skepticism is entirely justified. This is the hallmark of an unreliable narrator experiencing severe cognitive dissonance.
He just can't handle it.
His ego cannot tolerate the reality of the situation. that he is being rejected, that his marriage is failing, and that he is powerless to stop it.
Yeah, because to accept that she is simply a sad, conflicted woman navigating a painful but common human experience.
That would require him to process his own grief and inadequacy.
He can't handle the rejection, so he has to turn her into a monster. If she's a monster, he doesn't have to be sad. He just gets to be angry.
It goes deeper than just managing his sadness, though.
What do you mean?
By villainizing his partner, he is constructing a moral justification for what he is about to do.
Oh, wow.
If she is a grieving woman leaving an unhappy marriage, any violence against her is unprovoked, horrific abuse.
Right.
But if his brain can successfully rewrite the data in front of him, if he can convince himself that her tears are actually a deceptive cover for a sadistic smile, that she is attacking him with words like spears, then he is no longer an abuser.
He becomes the victim.
In his twisted psychological framework, he becomes a victim acting in self-defense.
That is terrifying. So the psychological framing isn't just a symptom of his anger. It is the necessary prerequisite for his violence.
Exactly.
He builds a dam of rationalization, stacking up all these perceived slights and imagined malice. And once he has successfully convinced himself she's a cruel enemy, that psychological dam breaks.
Leading us directly into the horrifying physical climax of the poem.
Because right after he concludes that she is savoring his broken heart, the transition from thought to lethal action is instantaneous.
There's no build-up.
None. The text reads, "Without respite or second thought, her frail white neck in my hand was caught, and I began to squeeze."
Without respite or second thought, there is zero hesitation.
No argument, no pleading, no throwing a plate against the wall. He goes directly to lethal force. It's terrifying.
He says she struggled only a moment more, and then he pulls her down.
The poem says, "As I pulled her down onto the kitchen floor from her chair and onto her knees, 22.
There are those glitchy details again.
Yeah, the missing urn floor, the number 22, evidence marker 22, right where she falls. But the setting here really strikes me. Moving from the dining table to the kitchen floor.
What is the significance of the kitchen space in this context for you?
Well, think about what a kitchen represents anthropologically. It's the hearth. It is the warm, life-giving core of a family home.
Absolutely.
It's where you feed your children, where those kids that just moved away probably sat doing their homework while dinner was cooking. And he deliberately drags her from the formal space of the dining room down onto that specific floor to kill her.
It is the ultimate desecration of the domestic sanctuary.
He has taken the very heart of their empty nest and violently inverted it into a cold, brutal crime scene.
And that spatial desecration ties directly into the underlying pathology of this entire sequence.
Which
It's the desperate need for control. The dialectic of abuse is almost always rooted in power dynamics.
Break that down for me. How does control map onto this specific sequence of events?
Well, look at the progression. When she sat him down and said it was time to talk, she seized control of the narrative.
Right.
When she stated the relationship had run its course, she took control of their shared future. The narrator experienced a total, agonizing loss of agency over his life and his marriage.
His trembling legs were a physical manifestation of that powerlessness.
Exactly. He was reduced to a passive recipient of his own life falling apart.
So how does a deeply fractured, hostile mind reclaim agency?
Through absolute, undeniable physical dominance. The violence isn't a loss of control. It is a terrifying reassertion of it.
Yeah.
He exerts the ultimate physical control over her respiration, over her life, to compensate for his emotional impotence. And you can see the absolute tragedy of this power dynamic play out in her final, desperate words.
Her final words are devastating. As he has his hands around her neck, he notes the bulging eyes in her beautiful face and the pure terror in her voice.
And he actually eases up just enough to let her speak.
And she doesn't curse him. She cries, "I'm sorry, I cannot explain. I never meant to cause you this pain. I never meant to be so weak."
This piece of dialogue completely shatters the villainous caricature he built of her just moments prior at the dining table.
Completely. She isn't spewing venom. She isn't savoring his pain.
Even in the face of her own murder, she is apologizing for being weak. It suggests a deeply ingrained dynamic of coercion in their marriage, where she feels responsible for managing his emotional volatility.
She is terrified and deeply remorseful.
It proves that his entire justification was a fabricated delusion.
But the tragedy is that the truth doesn't stop him.
The truth is irrelevant at this point. The control has already been seized. The physical dominance has replaced the need for moral justification.
He responds to her apology with arguably the most chilling line in the entire piece.
What's that?
He says, So that was all it took. I really couldn't help but look, and I watched the light leave her eyes.
He doesn't look away in shame.
He doesn't close his eyes. He actively watches her die on the floor of their kitchen.
It is the absolute peak of the horror. It's a moment of intense, incredibly dark intimacy. He demands to witness the final consequence of his reclaimed power.
But Grendel doesn't let him linger in that dark triumph.
No, that horrific intimacy is instantly, violently shattered by the intrusion of the outside world.
Immediately after the light leaves her eyes, the poem pivots with literal flashing lights.
The cops!
Yeah, the very next line reads, "And I knew right away when I saw the flashing lie that someone had called about our fight."
Notice again the degraded language.
Lie instead of lights,
Yeah.
Fi instead of fight. The reality is breaking down faster now. The cops are outside.
The outside world has pierced the hermetic bubble of his domestic nightmare. The architecture of the home can no longer keep the consequences of his actions at bay.
And his internal logic instantly shifts from the slow, deliberate intimacy of the murder to pure, frantic panic.
Right.
He says, and there'd be no sending them away this time. Which, by the way, implies a massive amount of dark history in just a few words.
This time.
It strongly suggests that there is a pattern here. They've had domestic disturbances before. Neighbors have heard them before.
He's probably talked the police out of intervening at the front door in the past.
But this time, with his wife dead on the kitchen floor, the illusion of the peaceful empty nest is permanently shattered. He knows it's over.
The gravity of reality crashes down on him. There is no charming the police, no manipulating the narrative anymore.
The physical evidence of his crime is absolute.
So facing the complete loss of his life and his freedom, he makes a final, fatal decision to retain the only scrap of control he has left.
Control over his own end.
Yeah.
He runs from the kitchen, through the house, to the bedroom, again, tracing a path through the most intimate spaces of the domestic sphere.
From the dining room where they shared meals, to the kitchen where they cooked, and now to the bedroom where they slept.
He runs to the bedside table and grabs a gun, knowing he'd be able to finish this once. And for another clipped word, for all, he puts the gun beneath his chin, closes his eyes, and then we get the final line of the poem. I heard no sound when I let the hammer fall 23.
I heard no sound, and then that final number.
23.
I have a serious question about this specific sensory detail. I heard no sound.
Go ahead.
Why doesn't he hear it? Is this meant to be the literal biological reality of instant death? Like, the gunshot physically destroys the brainstem and the auditory cortex so quickly that the biological hardware cannot even process the sound of the explosion.
From a strictly physiological standpoint, that is a highly accurate read. The velocity of a bullet traveling through the brain is faster than the speed of neural transmission.
Wow, okay.
The nervous system is instantly annihilated, meaning he literally would not have the biological time to hear the sound that killed him.
That's intense.
But, poetry rarely operates solely on clinical biology. If we examine this through a literary lens, the silence carries a much heavier thematic weight.
Talk me through the literary layer of that silence. The silence represents total, inescapable finality. Look at the acoustic trajectory of the poem.
It accelerates dramatically from quiet tranquility.
Exactly. It starts with a slow, lazy, quiet morning. It moves to an anxious, tense afternoon. It erupts into a frantic, violent verbal and physical confrontation.
Then it introduces the chaotic, glaring intrusion of the police sirens and flashing lights.
The volume and the panic build to an absolute crescendo, and then abruptly it ends in total, absolute silence.
The darkest night, he mentions in the very first line, is finally completely realized in that silent sensory void.
The ultimate sensory deprivation.
So, stepping back and looking at The Darkest Night as a complete work, Grindel has taken us on this harrowing, breakneck journey.
It really is a journey.
By forcing us into that tight first-person perspective, we aren't just reading about a crime. We are trapped inside the mind of the perpetrator while he is actively rationalizing the unthinkable.
We see firsthand how a person can warp their partner's tears into malice just to construct a psychological permission slip for their own violence.
It serves as a powerful testament to the mechanics of narrative storytelling.
It demonstrates how deliberate manipulation of language, pacing, and point of view can create a profound emotional whiplash for the reader.
And it exposes the terrifying fragility of human psychology.
It illustrates the extreme, horrific lengths a mind will go to the reality and will bend and break when confronted with a sudden, unbearable loss of control.
It's an incredibly unsettling dive into the mechanics of domestic tragedy. We've spent this entire time dissecting the brutal physical and psychological reality of this crime scene.
We've mapped the path from the dining table to the kitchen to the bedroom.
But there is one final lingering detail from the very beginning of the text that fundamentally alters how we understand everything we just discussed.
Oh, right.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with this thought to mull over. Remember the framing device in the very first line of the poem.
'Twas darkest night when I had that dream.
He calls this entire agonizingly detailed sequence a dream.
A dream. Yeah.
So if all of this is a dream, does that mean the narrator didn't actually die when the hammer fell? Did the gun jam at the last second?
Did he survive and is now sitting in a prison cell dreaming of what he did?
Or, honestly, is the truth something far worse? What if the biological reality of that final gunshot was true?
What if he did die and that final silence wasn't an end, but a beginning?
What if he is trapped in some sort of purgatory, forced to vividly relive the fragmented, glitchy memory of his terrible crime the darkest night, moving from room to room, watching the light leave her eyes every single time he closes his eyes?
Man, what a thought.
Think about that the next time you look at a photograph of an empty, quiet kitchen. Until next time.